In this video, I'm about to share with you a story of twin girls that is both fascinating and a little spooky. A story so complex in its strangeness, it seems one twin will make the ultimate sacrifice for the other. A special pact only these twin sisters understand. Identical twins often share a bond that few others can intrude upon. But sometimes that bond twists and turns in peculiar ways, creating scenarios so unusual that it leans toward the supernatural. In the 1970s, in a small town off the coast of Wales, the relationship between these twin girls slowly descends into madness. Join me for the odd mystery of the silent twins, a tale of mental illness, failed institutions, and a mysterious death that would break the silence at last. Join me for a ride through strange and mysterious here at Odd Mysteries Stories. The silent twins were not mute. Instead, June and Jennifer Gibbons spoke only to each other in their own special language that nobody else could understand. They also mirrored one another's behaviors in quite eerie ways. Parents Aubrey and Gloria Gibbons were immigrants from Barbados who settled in Haverfordwest, Wales. Their twins, June and Jennifer, were born on April 11, 1963. The family spoke English at home, and the girls eventually learned to read and write English. But both young women suffered from a speech impediment that made it difficult even for their parents to understand them, and this was before an even more strange affliction presented itself. The speech impediment and the fact that they were the only black children in their elementary school made them a target for intense and constant bullying. It got so severe that school officials began releasing the girls early, hoping they could sneak out and avoid harassment. Every incident drove June and Jennifer closer together. They were each other's lifeline. Eventually, the twins forged a pact, one that drove them to develop a secret language. They spoke to their parents less and less, though they would sometimes pass written notes to people, usually their mother, but they began refusing to read or write at school. This led to a bizarre interpersonal dynamic in which the twins believed they were passing each other's spirits back and forth. They felt they were living as one, possessing one another at will. Their parents grew increasingly concerned, but weren't sure how to address the problem. In 1974, when the girls were 11 years old, a school medic named John Reese was administering a school-sanctioned health checkup. He noticed the twin girls' behavior as odd. Their demeanor went beyond unintelligible conversation. They were completely non-reactive to being examined and vaccinated. Reese described the girls as acting like dolls. The school headmaster was accustomed to dealing with the Gibbons girls so often that he brushed off Reese's concerns. But Reese was too conscientious to give up. He notified a child psychologist named Tim Thomas, who would go on to insist that the young ladies be enrolled in therapy. Thomas believed the bullying had caused the girls to become selectively mute, wherein a child can't speak in certain settings but can speak fine in others. In 1977, the twins met with speech therapist Anne Treharne. Both girls refused to speak in Treharne's presence, but would allow her to record them if she left them alone. Treharne identified their secret language as a speeded-up version of Bajan Creole that was still nearly impossible to translate or follow. Even if someone had been able to translate it, the girls themselves refused to communicate with anyone other than each other. Treharne also observed another disturbing feature of the girls' dynamic. She felt that Jennifer was dominating June in an unhealthy way. She had the sense that June would have spoken to her, had Jennifer not compelled June to remain silent. She said she could actually feel Jennifer's power, even as she sat in her office with an expressionless gaze. The speech therapist, too, came to believe that June was being possessed by her twin sister. It wasn't long before the various health professionals involved in June and Jennifer's care offered what they thought was the best and kindest solution: separate the twins and force them to interact with the outside world. Parents Aubrey and Gloria agreed with the plan, so the Gibbons girls were sent to two separate boarding schools. Perhaps there, each of them would break out of their shells and develop a sense of their individual selves. Sadly, the separation made everything much, much worse. Both Jennifer and June withdrew to the point of catatonia. At one point, the catatonia was so severe that it took two people to get June out of bed. School officials described her body as stiff and as heavy as a corpse. Aubrey and Gloria had no choice but to reunite the girls. The result was a pair that was more withdrawn than ever. They would write letters to their parents occasionally, but mostly spoke only to each other. They retreated to their room to enact elaborate fantasies with their dolls, which they would record and share with their younger sister, Rose. They knew what was happening to them was problematic. The twin sisters would kneel by their beds, open the Bible, and chant verses in their strange language, praying for the strength to at least speak to their mother and father. Nevertheless, the traumas they'd suffered in their early life were too deep, and they found conversation with outsiders to be too difficult. But when they were gifted a pair of journals for Christmas, they discovered something that wasn't hard for them at all: writing and storytelling. The girls took a mail-order storytelling course at the age of 16 and began writing novels and short stories. June even self-published a novel called The Pepsi-Cola Addict, a tale about a young teenager seduced by his high school teacher. Many of their themes revolved around young, attractive people who committed grisly crimes, often in far-flung American cities like Malibu. Perhaps the themes hinted at their burgeoning desire to get out and have adventures of their own. In 1981, at the age of 18, they started spending time with a pair of American brothers they knew from school in West Wales. It's not known if they ever spoke to the boys, but perhaps they didn't have to. The boys introduced them to glue-sniffing, cigarettes, and vodka. At one point, the two girls went on a 5-week petty crime spree culminating in an act of arson. Before they set the fire, they checked to be sure nobody was in the building. They even essentially turned themselves in, breaking their silence long enough to prank call the police about the fire. They spoke English on the call, then, giggling, returned home to record the incident in their diaries, confessions that would later be used against them in court. Their secret language, eerily mirrored in their body language, and their refusal to speak to judges, lawyers, law enforcement officials, or anyone else, led to them being placed in Broadmoor, which was a maximum security hospital for the criminally insane. The two girls had no idea what they were in for at Broadmoor. Initially, they believed it would be what they thought might be like paradise. Both girls wanted to get better and imagined a place where they would be healed and supported in that endeavor. Instead, they were diagnosed with schizophrenia and subjected to high doses of antipsychotics and tranquilizers over the course of 12 years. Jennifer developed blurred vision, they say, in response to the drugs. At first, their condition even appeared to grow worse. For example, sometimes only one twin would eat. The next day, the other twin would indulge as her sister starved. Often, nurses would find the girls frozen in the same pose, even though they were locked in cells on the opposite ends of the hospital. They lived side by side with some of the United Kingdom's worst criminals and even took boyfriends from among these inmates. Some of their neighbors included the Yorkshire Ripper and the deadly gangster Ronnie Cray. Cray took a liking to the girls, sending them Christmas and birthday cards. But if they were well-liked, they were also often in danger. For example, they were harassed by one of the UK's most notorious pedophiles, and if the man never touched them, he certainly threatened them. Yet, Broadmoor helped them in some ways too. The highly structured lifestyle offered benefits. They could go to classes, earn privileges, attend socials, and develop relationships with fellow inmates. And if their boyfriends were what might be considered axe murderers, neither of them seemed to care much about it. They found a level of acceptance among the inmates at Broadmoor that they'd never experienced anywhere else. They even joined the hospital choir. Nevertheless, 12 years later, the girls wanted out. They began speaking English and talking to others at this point, largely to convince doctors they should be released. Initially, they were told they could expect to be in Broadmoor for the rest of their lives. That's when they met Marjorie. Journalist Marjorie Wallace took an interest in the tale of the silent twins, visiting their home in Wales. She found notebooks of stories, all written in English, and took them all home to read them. She was struck by the rich, imaginative world created by the girls. Marjorie was able to draw the girls out of their shells like no one else had. She began her visit with a simple statement. She said, "I read your stories." It was June who perked right up and asked, "Did you like them?" After that, Marjorie visited often. The three seemed to take genuine joy in one another's company. Yet by studying the girls' writing, Marjorie discovered a shocking dark side to their seemingly inseparable bond. Both girls felt trapped by one another. June mirrored the language so many others had commented on over the years. In her journals, June described a feeling of being possessed by her sister. She referred to Jennifer as a dark shadow and lived in fear of her twin. Jennifer echoed similar sentiments, saying she and June were fatal enemies. She described her sister as a face of misery, deception, and murder. She sometimes expressed fear, but more often felt anger. Jennifer remained the dominant force in their intense relationship. On several occasions, they physically attacked one another during their confinement at Broadmoor. In 1993, Jennifer told Marjorie that she was going to have to die. She said that she and June had decided that one of them had to die so the other could truly live. Marjorie obviously became alarmed, stating that the twins believed one of them had to die, and Jennifer agreed to sacrifice her life. Marjorie immediately notified the staff at the mental hospital. The doctors said there was nothing to worry about. The girls were under supervision. In fact, they had good news. They were scheduled for a transfer to the lower security Caswell Clinic. The plan was to hold them for perhaps a year longer and then return them to society. Their mental health prognosis was looking good. Yet some of the nurses echoed Marjorie's concerns. They said they'd heard the girls arguing, quarreling violently, and apparently in English, about which of them was going to die. As the Gibbons twins left Broadmoor, Jennifer's cheekbones were thin and her face flushed. She looked very afraid. June, on the other hand, appeared determined. Jennifer seemed exhausted during the trip to Caswell Clinic. She laid her head in her sister's lap, seeming to drift off. While checking the girls in, psychiatrist Tegwin Williams noticed Jennifer's condition. He said she appeared under the weather. It was only hours after their arrival that Jennifer slipped into a coma. While Jennifer lay comatose, June placed a red rose over her chest. Doctors tried to save Jennifer, but nothing they did helped her recover. At the age of 29, Jennifer Gibbons died. The determined cause of death was acute myocarditis, a sudden inflammation of the heart. Before June's release from the hospital, they investigated Jennifer's death to rule out poison or foul play. No evidence was found, and the matter never went to the police. June revealed some of Jennifer's strange behavior before her death, including slurred speech and saying she was dying. Doctors believed that the tranquilizers and antipsychotic medications may have provoked Jennifer's immune system. While June had been on the same medication, Jennifer's vision problems had served as a hint that she was more susceptible and vulnerable to the medications than June was. June herself remained in perfect health. So, do you think that Jennifer and June decided which one of them was going to die? Did their love-hate relationship ultimately reach a point where death was the only possible outcome? Did they do something the doctors couldn't detect to help that death along? June spoke to Marjorie Wallace and reporters after Jennifer's death, giving her own perspective on their story. June said that their speech impediment played a large role in their pact to stop talking with anyone else. She said they felt despair and desolation. The girls felt like everyone hated them. She spoke of feeling trapped in her twinship. She spoke of an incident wherein Jennifer started hitting her, shouting, "You are Jennifer." June fought to hold on to her identity, responding, "No, I am June. I'm not you." She also often spoke of another incident where, at the age of 18, her sister Jennifer tried to strangle her with a wire. As for Jennifer's death, June paints a very different picture than the one told by the nurses at Broadmoor and by Marjorie Wallace. She said Jennifer simply told her, "I think I'm going to die soon," and June wrote it off as a joke. When telling the story, June did not address or explain the arguments the staff members overheard or the things she and Jennifer had said to Marjorie. June's transformation was instant. She began speaking to everyone in English, as if she'd been doing so her whole life. She later said, "I'm free at last, liberated, and at last Jennifer has given up her life for me." She described it as a washing away of her sins, that she was finally free of her sister. June also said that she grieves for Jennifer and lives for her sister. She even claims that whatever she sees and does, Jennifer can see and do as well. It's not clear whether she's being poetic or if there is some supernatural layer to the twins' relationship. But the question remains, how did the twins come to decide that Jennifer would be the one to die? Or, if it wasn't a choice, how did Jennifer come to predict her own death? What really killed Jennifer on that fateful day in 1993? June spent a lot of time writing the hospital after Jennifer's death, seeking answers, but none ever came. According to my research, acute myocarditis typically affects young people and is a consequence of infections, exposure to toxic substances, or immune system activation. Symptoms include mild chest pain, arrhythmias, heart failure, cardiogenic shock, or death. To this day, Broadmoor officials insist Jennifer looked fine when they put her on the transport, stating they would have held her if it had appeared she was unwell. So there is a good chance she was not experiencing symptoms when she got into the vehicle, and her fearful, flushed appearance was a psychological reaction rather than a physical one. The trip between Broadmoor Clinic and Caswell Clinic took only 2 hours and 21 minutes by car. It seems ironic that Jennifer was essentially dying during that time frame. And how did the twins know Jennifer's death was imminent? I'd love some feedback about this. If you are a medical professional listening to this story, one possibility is simply that their decision or knowing was a matter of intuition, or, in scientific terms, unconscious inference. Unconscious inferences are the process underlying insights such as hunches, intuitions, guesses, and gut reactions. Our subconscious minds take in a steady stream of information that we simply don't have the bandwidth to process with our conscious awareness. Think of all the data you must tune out every day just to function. When you have a gut feeling that doesn't flow from any logical source but turns out to be true, science tells us that you're just synthesizing all that data and then receiving the information in the form of a flash of insight. There's nothing psychic or supernatural about it, and it's a phenomenon that happens to all of us every day. Jennifer might have had 1,000 of those tiny little signals and hints from her body that led to a flash of insight that she was going to die, even though she didn't know how or why. This, in turn, could have led to an argument or discussion about her imminent demise. Do you believe something like this could have happened to Jennifer that day? Psychology is a strange and sometimes horrifying thing. It is possible that if Jennifer and June came to a decision that Jennifer would die, that she simply willed herself dead. The phenomenon is known as psychogenic death. It's the same phenomenon that makes it possible for people to die of a broken heart. However, the progression doesn't usually follow the evolution we saw in Jennifer's symptoms, at least as far as we know. Usually, the process takes roughly a month. The victim gives up living. Some have even gone so far as to call the disease give-up-itis. It routinely strikes prisoners of war, people trapped in extreme survival scenarios. And yes, those who have been imprisoned in jails or mental hospitals. First, The victim withdraws from the world, falling into a state of apathy. They become incapable of making decisions, lose their ability to speak, and move through the world in a sort of brain fog. They may stop eating, drinking, and cleaning themselves. As the condition worsens, their motivation and cognitive function continue to decline, as does their ability to speak. By the end, they experience profound apathy, as well as indifference to pain, thirst, and hunger. Shortly before they die, they experience a brief recovery. The condition is associated with schizophrenia, the very condition June and Jennifer were diagnosed with. The problem with this theory is that we have no reports of Jennifer going through any of these stages that we know of. Of course, if she had been struggling in this way, Broadmoor wouldn't have been eager to admit it, especially if they didn't pay it very much attention. Would the nurses have seen those symptoms and mostly been glad that Jennifer wasn't acting difficult that day? Psychogenic death wasn't well understood in the early 90s, so they might not have realized she was in any danger. Then again, they might not have put her into a transport either. Jennifer did appear fearful before going on the transport, the very opposite of apathetic. But again, patients who are experiencing psychogenic death get a little better before they ultimately die. Do you think Jennifer essentially willed herself to death, setting her sister free after a lifetime of domination, simply because she was the one who lost the argument between them? Your own thoughts can kill you too. Sometimes believing that you are ill or are going to die can cause it to happen. This is known as the nocebo effect. It isn't just a fun play on the better-known placebo effect. It is Latin and means I will harm. But it works in essentially the same way. Patients who believe they are going to be ill and develop symptoms can even instantly die from them. For example, in the 18th century, students at one Viennese medical school bullied one of the assistants. They grabbed him, announcing he was to be decapitated, and blindfolding him. They bowed his head on a chopping block before dropping a wet cloth on his neck, never realizing their prank was about to kill him. The assistant believed that the cold cloth was a blade so strongly that he literally died on the spot. People who die or develop symptoms this way aren't faking them any more than people who heal because of the placebo effect aren't faking their transformations. Measures of nerve activity following nocebo treatment show that the spinal cord begins responding to heightened pain before conscious deliberation would even be possible. To this end, doctors are exploring how they can give side effect warnings. For example, without actively triggering them in patients. So, upon making a declaration of death or coming to a decision that she had to be the one to die, Jennifer might well have simply believed in her demise so strongly that she forced her body into the acute response that ultimately killed her. Do you believe that someone can actually will themselves to die and succeed at it? June looked determined as she got onto the bus. Of course, it's impossible to say why anyone wears an expression on her face. She might have looked determined to make things work at Caswell and to continue developing her abilities to speak to others. But what if she knew something was going to happen? Did Jennifer take something she wasn't supposed to take? Did the pair enlist the help of their axe-murderer boyfriends to trigger Jennifer's death somehow? Was June determined not to undermine the twins' decision that Jennifer would die? A tox screen revealed that there was no poison in Jennifer's system, but Jennifer or one of her beaux might have had ready access to syringes with one simple theft. Someone might have injected air into Jennifer's bloodstream. An air embolism can cause cardiac arrest and would have caused inflammation around Jennifer's heart as well. Air embolisms can kill a person within 5 minutes, but take as long as 48 hours. Some of Jennifer's symptoms would have been consistent with an air embolism, while others were missing. For instance, loss of consciousness is certainly a symptom. However, air embolism patients also usually have difficulty breathing, pain, skin hue changes, and low blood pressure. We don't know what Jennifer's blood pressure was, and it's not necessary for someone to suffer all the symptoms of a condition to fall victim to it. so it's difficult to say. Did someone help her kill herself? Was that why she was so afraid as she stepped onto that bus? June eventually wrote to the hospital, requesting a copy of her medical records. At first, Broadmoor put her off, but just after June's 60th birthday, Broadmoor finally sent the records she'd requested. The papers did not contain startling revelations, only the predictable insight that mental health professionals were not equipped to deal with the condition of the silent twins during those years. June has gone on to live a normal life. She has even shared her perspective on her life as one of the silent twins with the rest of the world. She released a podcast in 2023 called June, Voice of a Silent Twin, which I will link in the description below. June spends time with her remaining family members, including her nieces and nephews. She and Marjorie Williams remain close friends. However, Jennifer's shadow continues to linger. What are your thoughts on what happened to Jennifer? Let me know your theories and insights in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, imagine a brutal murder case filled with lies and cover-up so chilling, it has the power to turn an entire community against one another. That's the Keddy Cabin murders. Watch the featured video on your screen and see if you can figure out who killed the Sharp family.